All right, so I'm Nyman, working at Finnish consulting company called GOSEI. I'm a large-scale Scrum trainer and a Scrum trainer. We are working with many agile adoptions from telecom industry to public sector. We are one of the few coaching companies less coaching companies in the world, and our website is there. So, scaling Scrum teams from 2005. Large-scale Scrum was pretty unknown at that point in time. No. Large-scale Scrum was pretty unknown in these times, so let's look at the problems that we had in that point in time. This was browsing gateway. Our problems were that we were doing this kind of incremental development, 3 months increments. First we did design, then we did some requirement analysis or vice versa, and then we did some coding, and then we did some testing, and as a side effect, we had lots of problems, releases constantly late, quality problems. We didn't have any test automation. Testing and development was even separated in different parts of the buildings. We have a nicely manual weekly build system that was done by each developer on a weekly basis. It was really boring. It took several hours to do. So we had this kind of a problem. We are not profitable. So what to do then? In this time, Greg Larman and Bas Bodde were working with Nokia Networks, and they were looking at how can we expand this one team Scrum that works so fabulously with one team to work with many teams. And the management of this organization happened to be in one of these kind of seminars that Greg Larman kept, and they got the idea, hey, Scrum could help us. So how could we start it there? Management buy-in was quite easy to get because we had the problems. So we had first this kind of a targeted trainings for key influencers in organization. Greg Larman and Bas Bodde gave the training. We had something like 7 people from organization, and Greg Larman and Bas Bodde, they looked much younger in that point in time. I remember that. So we were bought in by this. Not many people have any idea of Scrum or Agile, but it sounded quite lucrative. This is the thing that we want to do. So how do you start? You start by introducing Scrum extreme programming practices for whole organization, and how we did it. We had this kind of a whole auditorium set up. There were something like 100 people there listening for the talk from the Greg Larman when he explained what is Agile, what is Scrum, how it works, so we get basic understanding for everybody. And then we started by creating teams. Management had this kind of idea. We have lots of managers, so they need to decide who will be in which team, so they make the decision for our first feature teams. Cross-functional teams, so we have developers, testers, documentation, architecture people, everything in the same teams. And then for the next release, let's start working on these key features that we have there and aim for long-lived feature teams. So what is first thing that you need to do when you move to this kind of a feature teams? You got to get rid of this kind of a functional organization that we have previously. We have developers in one organization, testers in other organization, or then database people not working with other people and things like that. So we did this kind of organizational redesign. We removed the management from the functional departments, and the management became managers of Scrum teams. And as a side effect, we were able to create teams that are able to work on end-to-end customer features and work directly with them. Also, we need to remove this kind of physical environment there. We had this kind of, how do I say, cubicle farm, not so bad as in the picture, but still people were sitting in cubicles, couple of people in one cubicle, so we need to remove this one and move to this kind of a team-based environment. We were not able to get as good as is in this picture, but pretty close to that one. What else we need to do? We need to get rid of the manual build. In the first sprint, we didn't have continuous integration. When you try to build some software in the 4-week sprints, doing the manual builds kills you. So we decided that continuous integration is must. We need to invest on that. To our surprise, in the next sprint, we were able to do it. It was not so hard. There was no need to do it previously. Just by reducing the time that needs to develop something, create urgency of actually doing the thing. Branching, we had this kind of a nice tool from IBM called ClearCase, where the branches are main way of developing things. It was really killing us. We need to do lots of tailoring to it to actually make it work so we could do main branch development. What else there? Oh, manual testing. If you are doing this kind of incremental development, short increments, manual testing, it's just so ineffective, it kills you. So we started writing our own test automation framework. Never do that nowadays. In 2005, it was option that you could afford, but currently there are so many frameworks that don't do it. And we started writing automatic tests, but of course the automatic tests were for the new functionality. What to do with the old hundreds of manual test cases, then the management has this kind of a nice idea. Let's offshore them to India. And you can imagine what happens when some Indian offshoring company tries to automate testing for the product that they have no clue. They read the manual scripts and then write them in the Java, the same steps that are in the manual scripts. And then when there is in the manual script something like wait for 1 minute, they put their sleep for 60 seconds. And when the test fails, there were no recovery and things like that. So basically, we got some tests from India, but we need to rewrite them from scratch again. So it was work done twice. This was high-performance product, so we need to run the performance testing all the time. We had the performance test running there, and we were able to catch nicely all the performance problems in the next day because we run in the nightly performance test. Stability tests were run also constantly on there, mainly on the weekends, so we knew that the product is stable. So where we ended up, in 2007, we had this kind of a less framework set up there. We had joint sprint plannings, we had individual sprint planning tools with the teams, we had product backlog refinements, we had common review across all of the teams, individual team retrospectives, and then overall retrospective across the whole organization. So we basically were able to do as less as it described currently. All right, let's look at another case, how to build totally new product from scratch and same time growing the organization from large-scale Scrum to large-scale Scrum huge and see what kind of problems you end up having there. So the product that we started building, this is the end product, how it looked like. Took something like 3 years to get in this stage, is Flexi Network Gateway that binds the mobile network to internet. That's the product where all the traffic goes through. So when we started, we didn't have any software, we didn't have any hardware, so we need to build everything from scratch. Luckily, the hardware development was not done by us, it was done by other department. Actually, it was outsourced somewhere. And also the platform was done by platform organization. Sadly, we ended up having lots of problems with that. So we basically built only the application on top of the running platform. So when you start something from scratch, it's the key thing when you start, you want to have also management support for agile way of working. We had this couple of meetings there with the management there, R&D head, business line head, and decided that what kind of organizational setup we aim for. Do we change the organizational setup from the component teams to feature teams, and how many teams should we start with, and what is the way of actually get the things going. So in the literature, there is typically said that when you start something from the scratch, start with one team and then build on them. We thought that we are much better. Instead of starting with one team, we started with 2 teams. And to make things even more interesting, we had this kind of a traditional team that has good domain knowledge and one agile team who had this kind of a good working skills. They have built one product using Scrum previously. So how do you do it then? Let's see. Oops. So what you need to do then, you need to create the teams and you need to create your product backlog. And this is pictured at how we created the product backlog. We arranged the big workshop. We invited all the team members, all the architects that were in the organization, a couple of facilitators there. And their job was to look at, okay, this is the product, these are the main use cases, what is the functionality we built with there, and let's start writing these kind of things on the post-its. At the end of one-day workshop, we have this amount of post-its. That was our basic product backlog. Initial architecture, how you draw it. You draw it on the whiteboards there. You can easily change them, and these are initial pictures of the high-level architecture, how it's going to happen. Of course, when you start something from the scratch, you need to decide everything from the scratch. What kind of a programming language do you use? Options were C or C++. For some strange reason, the organization decided to use C there. Even they had skills for doing C++, but there were some strange forces playing there around. Continuous integration, how to set that up. Basically, you have no code, so it's easily you put some Bamboo server there running, compiling nothing, and then you start building your code on top of that. Then you need to decide that, okay, what is your definition of done? What kind of test automation tools you use? And we decided that all the code needs to be unit tested, and to claim something as done, it has to have at least one automated acceptance test. The tool that we used there were Robot Framework and Catapult Protocol Driver. Why did we end up using Catapult Protocol Driver? It's an interesting story. One of the persons that had a good influence in the organization said that Catapult is the best tool for this, let's select that one. After a few months, we realized that it's not a good tool, but when you have invested several $100,000 to actually buying the tool and hardware for the tool, you are stuck with that. You are not able to get rid of it. So don't select any expensive tools without really testing them first. So to get good feedback, we needed to have some kind of a prototype hardware. Luckily, there was on the market same kind of chipset available, built on some kind of a hardware, running some kind of operating system that we could start using. The whole product was built using prototype hardware at least for almost 1 year until we started moving towards more correct hardware. Setting up teams. So how do you then set up the teams? We had 2 teams, one traditional background, one agile background. The advice in literature is that you typically mix those teams. So did we also do that one? But later on, the feedback from the agile team was that they really hated this one. They said that we would have learned the things much faster by being one team. And I have heard same kind of feedback also from other organizations. If you have really good working teams, probably the team is better learning new things without splitting the teams to 2 or mixing the teams. All right, where to get? We had now 2 teams, 2 managers that were previously managing these kind of teams. Where to get Scrum Master? Natural selection is that managers become Scrum Masters, but it didn't work. We find out after a couple of sprints that there's no use of doing that. People were looking at the Scrum Master managers and say, you're a manager, tell us what to do. When the person said, no, I'm a Scrum Master, I'm not telling you what to do. Yeah, you have been our manager for 10 years. You are telling us what to do, so keep on telling us. So then they decided, okay, managers, they need to do something else, and the team selected then the Scrum Master for themselves. Then we had interesting problem what to do with the managers. They're free agent for some time until they find out good things them to do. So growing from 2 to 8 teams. We basically started with 2 teams, 4 months. We had some kind of architecture there in the shape. We could add it then teams there. First we had 2 teams, and then a couple of months later 2 more. And how we then worked with this kind of setup with up to 8 teams is that we had joint sprint plannings like in the LESS. Then we have a coordination during the sprint. We had Scrum of Scrum every day, short 15 minutes problem-solving meeting. And most of the problems were solved by people discussing with other teams because we were co-located. We had joint sprint review and then team retrospectives. Let's see, I have some pictures of this kind of how does this kind of a joint sprint planning look like. This is the stage when we have 2 teams. We have quite a small room there. We can see the teams, they're doing something on the walls. And then we can see some managers, architects, they're doing some important things with the laptop there. And then the team rooms, we had in the beginning quite bad office setup, but luckily the management in the organization realized that this is not really working. We need to tear down some walls there to get this kind of a decent team rooms, and basically we did that, or asked this kind of other department to do the tearing down the walls, and this is the team rooms that we ended up having there. What you can see in the picture is that there in the behind there's actual team space, they have whiteboards, there are projectors, then they have some visitor spaces, their other team is there behind the wall there. Of course, we need, when you have more than 2 teams, you need to introduce some kind of a bug tracking system. We found out the best thing is that you put all the bugs on the wall where everybody's walking by every morning, so you can see there how many open bugs we have. The rule was that there cannot be more than 6 open bugs in at one time. If you find a new one, you need to fix other one before reporting something. Interesting. The Wi-Fi. So then, sprint review, how does it look like? We had in this point something like 4 to 6 teams, I not exactly remember, but we were still fitting in this kind of area there. We have the product owner there showing that what we're basically discussing with the teams. Teams are showing them what they have done. Everybody is interested in what's going on there. For overall retrospective, so many people were already interested in that, so we have reserved this kind of auditorium type of space for every other Wednesday evening. It was reserved for us, and here we can see then interested people solving some problem there, some other people working on other problem, and here is then a list of all of the current open issues that we could work with. Of course, in this overall retrospective, you can only solve some things, and then the key thing is to decide who is then continuing solving the problems then later on. Growing from 2 to 8 teams, it was easy. We didn't need to change much. We just needed bigger rooms to do things. When we got new teams, we had coaches assigned for each team, and then, of course, the new teams, they came from traditional backgrounds, so they resisted pretty much the new ways of working, so don't underestimate it. You need to work with them much. You need to teach them what is the tooling, why do we do things like this, why do we do incrementally, why don't we have, instead of 2 weeks iterations, why don't we have 2 months iteration, and things like that that they were used to. So this is our setup. Basically, this was less setup at 2008. Nothing really interesting in the picture. Now it comes then interesting, when you add more than 8 teams, you end up in this kind of a picture. You need to have, for each team set up, this kind of area product owners, and you need to split it to areas, and we did some mistakes there, and we then need to live with the mistakes that we did. And the main mistakes was that we introduced 2 small requirement areas. They had only few teams. As a side effect, for each requirement area, the set of the teams could not do much on the area. And then we needed to switch teams between the areas quite often, and even in the worst cases, one team ended up working with 2 requirement area product owners or area product owners. And that's why the advice currently in the LESS is that the requirement area has to have at least 4 teams, because otherwise it becomes really problematic. All right, we had also some problems with the product owner. The product owner changed in the middle of the actual product development, and the new product owner was really a control freak. He was not able to let go any of his power to area product owners. He wanted to be responsible from all of the prioritization and responsible of accepting all the things. That led to a situation that the area product owners that we got from the product management were more of this kind of domain expert than really doing product owner work that they should have done. So at less huge, we ended up at some point having more than 20 teams on the 4 sites. Most of the teams were in Finland. We have something like 3 teams in Greece, 4 teams in India, a couple of teams in Germany. How did it work? All of the teams had the same 2 weeks cadence. All of the teams need to follow same development practices, and it worked pretty well. Though the R&D head was asked at some point that, would you take this kind of off-site teams anymore? And his answer was that no, it was too much problems. I wouldn't go there. I would basically stick with one site. Interesting problems arise when you are doing this kind of things, that overall retrospective, after 1 year, you have solved all the easy problems. All the problems that the management of this organization could solve, you have solved them. And then you end up having problems that the problems needs to be solved somewhere in the higher or other department management needs to solve them. And those things typically take huge amount of time, and how to keep people motivated to come to the overall retrospective where pretty much nothing has happened because everything is moving so slowly. So we ended up having this kind of a problem there, that the problems stayed there open very long time. Even the management worked on them together, but they could have worked them more thoroughly and forming this kind of an improvement service that all of the managers in organization would pull together, form one team that would work on the problems, would probably have better impact on this. Also, we got this kind of a feedback that the new teams that came from the traditional organization to us, they need to have training. We provided them coaching, but not formal training. They understood how to work here, but they never got the ideas that why we are doing things like this. And you need to have real product owners. For inspection adaptation, team members complained that from the product owner 5-minute visit here that he visits with us, we don't get enough feedback from that so we could inspect and adapt. Employee feedback. We collected somewhere in the 2010 feedback from the employees that was done by external university professor who were basically interested in scaled agile development, and she interviewed something like roughly 15 key persons in organization. And the feedback was that we wouldn't have succeeded. Nobody wanted to go to old ways of working because they have more collaboration, freedom, discussion, impact on the product, and seeing the results with the fast feedback. Challenges then reported by people is that how to keep the product architecture in the good shape and how to see the whole, because each of the team were working on their areas, that how is this impacting on the whole product. Management feedback from the business line head. We had always working product, and according to him, basically we could sell the product to new customers because we could actually demonstrate the working product for the customer. Instead of showing PowerPoints that it will be ready after a few years, you could actually show it now it's working currently like this. If you're interested in the whole story, it's in the InfoQ. This was just some highlights from the story. Short trip to how to do less huge in insurance organization. So the insurance organization, they had a problem. They have a customer and they don't know which features will be ready for the customers and how to actually analyze what works for the customer. So this was the initial organization, and what they have then done before they invited one of my colleagues there to work with them was that they have done this kind of a functional or component-based organization and hope that will solve their problem. But basically what changes in this kind of a setup is not much. You just have a team-based organization, but you get rid of the managers there that are the problematic issues. You get rid of those. But still the teams were not able to really work with the customer directly, and the projects were just spanning through different teams. So they were quite smart. They realized after a few months that this doesn't really work for them. This doesn't solve the real problem, that how to actually deliver something for customer. So then they decided that we need to do this kind of a real organizational design and move to cross-functional feature teams. Then we can get the customer collaboration going better, and we know better which features will be ready at which point in time. So how to do it. You had existing teams. How to sell to the teams that, okay, we did it team formation a few months ago and now we need to form again the teams. It was sold so that now in this time you can select yourself which kind of a teams you create, arranging this kind of self-designing team workshop. How we did it there was basically we collected all the employees, information about them, what is their main practice, what is their main skills. We printed out then this kind of a name tags for each person. It contains the name, what is their main skill on the color, what is the inside this kind of a skill, their main responsibility, what they are doing, are they database developers, are they front-end developers or whatever. And then we invited everybody in this kind of a big place there in this organization, and the biggest place was cafeteria. We need to move some tables, but then it was okay. And then we created this kind of a template for the team building, how to actually form the teams, what is the minimum set of the teams. And here we had that two kind of a business persons, couple of technical guys, one tester, Scrum Master is minimum setup for one team. And then we invited people there and explained that this is what we want to do here. You need to select teams that are able to do end-to-end. They need to have this and these skills. And then people, then they have their name tags. They put the name tags to the slots. And after 3.5 hours, we had then teams. And this was really motivating for everybody because it was the first time where actually member in this organization could select their team members. What do you need to do? Then we have this kind of a product backlog was this kind of a technical backlog, not real product backlog. So we need to reshuffle the product backlog. So we need to do initial product backlog refinement with many teams. How we did it? We basically used cafeteria areas around the building and then split the work across many teams, mixed the teams, and then team's job was basically analyze all the requirements, come up with the user stories that has an acceptance criteria that are estimated. And then we did this kind of initial release planning. Here are all our user stories for the next 3 months release. We are planning this and these things, and this was quite accurate planning. For the first time in the history of this organization, we could see at least some confidence level that we could promise something to the customers. Product backlog was stored in this kind of an interesting tool, but the tool was not really usable as product backlog, so many of the product owners, or area product owners in this case, printed out the product backlog and put it in this kind of a rollable wall where you can have everything visible. There is not case study published on this, but it will be on the less case studies, probably on this year when it's reviewed. Final words. I have 1 minute time. There's nothing hard in less, but it does not work in your current organization because your organization will resist the change. As you said there, you need the management buy-in. They can make the key decisions. And if you don't have managers buy-in, maybe not start doing less because you end up having huge problems and people get desperately this kind of desperate there. Thank you very much.